A city where billionaires ride the subway, ghosts haunt the library, and a pizza slice can predict the economy. Welcome to New York, the world's most ridiculous riddle. Forget what you think you know. This is a place where history hides in sewer tunnels, secret gardens bloom on cathedrals, and even the statues are judging you. Tonight, we're diving headfirst into 101 strange, hilarious, and unsettling facts that prove New York isn't just a city, it's an unsolved mystery. Buckle up, because in New York, the truth is always stranger than fiction. Manhattan was bought for $24 worth of beads. In the most lopsided real estate deal since someone bought an NFT of a rock, Manhattan was purchased in 1626 by Dutch colonists for what amounts to about $24 worth of beads, tools, and other charming knickknacks. This was not, contrary to legend, a savvy Wall Street transaction. It was more of a yard sale with colonial overtones. The local Lenape people, it seems, may not have even understood the concept of land ownership, let alone that they were selling it. It's like someone giving you a friendship bracelet in exchange for your apartment lease. Imagine walking down Fifth Avenue today, looking up at glass fortresses of capitalism, knowing they all technically sit atop an ancestral land deal that involved essentially costume jewelry. It's almost poetic if your idea of poetry involves massive gentrification. And don't worry, this isn't even the weirdest part of New York's economic history. That honor might go to a logo, a very, very famous one, given away for free by a man who probably could have charged millions. The iconic I Love NY logo was given away for free. Ah yes, capitalism's favorite four-letter love letter, I Love NY. You've seen it on mugs, magnets, mouse pads, and probably at least one regrettable lower back tattoo. It's been printed more times than apologies from the MTA. And yet, the man behind the icon, graphic design legend Milton Glaser, did the unthinkable in 1977. He gave it away. For free. Like completely free. As in zero. As in, I'll just leave this multi-million-dollar branding idea here, you guys do whatever. Glaser whipped it up during a taxi ride on the back of an envelope. He was trying to help lift New York's image from the garbage pile it had lovingly curled up in during the 70s, when crime, bankruptcy, and disco were all equally rampant. What he created instead was an eternal love spell. A brand so potent it still works on tourists wandering around Times Square with neck pillows and unearned optimism. And because irony is New York's unofficial dialect, this entire cultural landmark was born not of greed, but goodwill. A logo that launched 1,000 souvenir shops, created by a man who asked for nothing. But if you think that's the most ridiculous thing New York gave the nation, wait till you hear where the entire United States government set up shop, before it ghosted for D.C. New York City was the first capital of the United States. It's true. Before Washington, D.C. was a gleam in a swamp's eye, America decided to set up its freshly sown democracy in New York City. From 1785 to 1790, NYC was the capital of the United States, which is exactly as chaotic as it sounds. Picture the entire founding government operating out of a city where street brawls were common. Pigs roamed freely, and nobody had mastered the concept of municipal garbage removal. If you think Congress is dysfunctional now, try imagining them all squashed in a candle-lit room above a tavern in Lower Manhattan, arguing over the Constitution while rats eavesdrop. George Washington was sworn in here, right on Wall Street, which means that technically both the American presidency and the American financial system were born on the same block. It's either poetic symmetry or karmic foreshadowing. Your pick. Of course, the government didn't stick around for long. It did what every New Yorker eventually does. It moved away for more space and cheaper rent. But don't worry, the real estate leftovers are still here, along with something even more immortal, like a giant piano that you can dance on. The famous FAO Schwartz toy store had a giant walk-on piano. Imagine this. You're a fully grown adult, dressed semi-formally, and suddenly you're hopping across a giant piano in a Manhattan toy store while a crowd of strangers watches you butcher chopsticks with your feet. Congratulations, you've just had the quintessential FAO Schwartz experience. The store wasn't just a place to buy overpriced stuffed animals. It was a whimsical fever dream with a retail price tag. FAO Schwartz, the granddaddy of American toy stores, made its name not only through its selection, but through its sense of theater. And no item better captured that showmanship than its enormous floor piano. Immortalized in the 1988 film Big, where Tom Hanks moonwalked his way into cinematic history, the piano became an icon, half toy, half performance art, and 100% chaos when two kids tried to play it at once. To walk into FAO Schwartz was to enter a cathedral of consumer childhood, and to step onto that piano was to desecrate it with joyous stomping. Sadly, like most New York miracles, the original store closed down in 2015 because apparently magic isn't recession-proof. But don't cry into your overpriced Legos just yet. There's always Times Square, which got its name in a move that can only be described as accidentally legendary. Times Square was originally named Longacre Square. Once upon a time, Times Square wasn't Times Square. It was called Longacre Square, a name that evokes pastoral walks, horses, and possibly gingham. That's because it was full of horses mostly. Carriage manufacturers, stables, and manure. You know, the usual pre-Broadway glitz. Then in 1904, the New York Times moved its headquarters into the brand new skyscraper at One Times Square, and everything changed. Because nothing says rebrand like a newspaper moving into the neighborhood and deciding it deserves naming rights. And just like that, Longacre became Times Square. The Times moved out just a few years later, but the name stuck. Mostly because Longacre doesn't exactly scream neon signs, Elmo impersonators, and sensory overload. Today, the only manure you'll find is metaphorical. The irony? The paper that gave the square its name now resides miles away, watching from a safe distance as its old stomping ground turns into a chaotic carnival every New Year's Eve. Still, Times Square remains the pulsing, blinking heart of the city, proof that even a place that started with horse poop can become a symbol of mass tourism. But no worries, the next icon didn't start with manure. It started with a revolution, and 214 crates. The Statue of Liberty arrived in 350 pieces packed in 214 crates. Ah yes, the Grand Lady of the Harbor, the beacon of hope, the green copper giant with a resting torch face. The Statue of Liberty didn't just roll into New York like Beyoncé on a world tour. She arrived in 1885 as a literal puzzle, 350 pieces distributed across 214 wooden crates, like the most ambitious IKEA shipment in history. Some assembly required. No instructions included. Hope you like riveting copper. The statue was a gift from France, which says a lot about international diplomacy in the 19th century. Here, have a monument. You assemble it. The U.S. handled the base because nothing bonds two countries like mutual construction anxiety. When the crates arrived, they were stored in Madison Square Park while money was still being crowdfunded to build the pedestal. Yes, even Lady Liberty had to wait on permits. When she was finally put together, piece by oxidizing piece, she became more than just a symbol of freedom. She became the city's most elegant traffic cone, guiding immigrants through a sea of bad accents and bureaucratic paperwork. But if you think that's impressive, wait until you meet the city's yellow-spotted army of overworked, overdriven, and eternally honking icons, the New York taxis. New York City has more than 12,000 licensed taxis. At any given moment in New York, you're never more than 5 seconds away from hearing a taxi horn, even if there's nothing to honk at. It's not just background noise, it's the unofficial city anthem, second only to the sound of a rat dragging a pizza slice. With over 12,000 licensed taxis roaming the streets, New York is less a city and more a yellow blur with a skyline. The classic yellow cab is as synonymous with the city as missed subway stops and existential dread. For decades, they were a lifeline, hailed by outstretched arms, desperate whistles, or that uniquely New York move, stepping off the curb like you own traffic. And every cab comes with a driver who might be a philosopher, a former neurosurgeon, or just really into conspiracy theories. Of course, now they've got competition. Ride-sharing apps have rolled in like tech bros at a dive bar. But the yellow cab remains, beaten, battered, and forever part of the asphalt bloodstream. Still, if you want to escape the honking madness, there's one place big enough to swallow the chaos whole. A place where trees, squirrels, and existential reflection roam free. Central Park is larger than the Principality of Monaco. When you stand in the middle of Central Park and can't hear a single car horn, you might begin to suspect you're not in New York at all. But you are, just in the eye of the storm. A green, manicured rectangle of serenity that is, believe it or not, larger than the entire country of Monaco. Yes, Central Park is literally bigger than a sovereign European nation. And yet people still complain it's hard to find a good picnic spot. Designed in the mid-1800s by Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux, Central Park was a revolutionary act of urban design. A landscaped illusion of wilderness carved right into the belly of the city. It's been home to concerts, protests, marriage proposals, joggers who take themselves too seriously, and more squirrels than anyone's counting. You can boat, ice skate, birdwatch, or get lost in it, physically and metaphorically. And the best part? It's public. That's right, free admission, no dress code, and no security line unless you count raccoons. It's where New Yorkers go to forget they're in New York. But if you're feeling fancy, don't worry. There's a hotel nearby that will remind you very quickly where you are, and it's not cheap. The Waldorf Astoria Hotel was the first hotel in the world to offer room service. Ah, room service, the human right that allows you to eat $42 scrambled eggs in a bathrobe at 2 a.m. in total shameful glory. And you have the Waldorf Astoria to thank for that. This iconic hotel didn't just elevate luxury, it invented a whole new category of pampering. I'm too rich to walk downstairs. Opened in its grand form in 1931, after a merger of two older rival hotels because, of course, the Waldorf Astoria was a monument to extravagance. Everything about it was designed to scream elegance, except, ironically, the invention of room service, which whispered it directly into your room. A phone call, a polite knock, and suddenly your loneliness came with fries. It was more than convenience. It was theater. A meal delivered with silver domes and linen napkins. So you could eat like royalty while watching bad TV in your underpants. A tradition that endures to this day in five-star hotels everywhere, where you too can pay triple the price for half the portion. And if you're thinking that's indulgent, just wait until you hear what New Yorkers did with tomatoes, cheese, and a brick oven. Because next, we're heading to the spiritual birthplace of American pizza. The first pizzeria in the United States, Lombardi's, opened in New York City in 1905. There are few things New Yorkers take more seriously than pizza. Not politics, not weather, not even subway delays. And it all traces back to a smoky, flour-dusted kitchen in Little Italy, where Lombardi's, the first licensed pizzeria in the United States, fired up its oven in 1905. What followed was not just a culinary tradition, it was a holy war over crust thickness. Lombardi's sold slices to Italian immigrants who were probably just happy to eat something hot and familiar in a city that otherwise offered them factory work and judgment. But then the rest of New York caught on, and suddenly pizza wasn't just food, it was currency. Over time, it evolved into the kind of religion that makes people scream at strangers over pineapple toppings. To this day, Lombardi's is still baking pies in Lower Manhattan. Tourists line up for the legacy. Locals roll their eyes at the tourists, and the staff pretends not to judge your choice of toppings. It's all part of the ritual. And if you think pizza's the only name New York reinvented, allow us to remind you, this city's always had an identity crisis. Even its nickname is a hand-me-down. Before it was called the Big Apple, New York City had nicknames like Gotham and Knickerbocker. The Big Apple may sound like the title of a failed 1970s sitcom, but somehow it stuck. Before that, New York City went by a few other charming nicknames. Gotham, which sounds like a place where billionaires dress like bats, and Knickerbocker, which sounds like a colonial-themed bar that serves watered-down cocktails. The term Gotham was first tossed around by Washington Irving in the early 1800s, long before Batman gave it a brooding makeover. Irving meant it satirically, referencing a village of supposed fools in English folklore. In other words, New York has always had a reputation for brilliance wrapped in madness. No changes there. Knickerbocker, meanwhile, came from Dutch settlers and eventually became shorthand for old-money Manhattanites who wore funny pants and had strong opinions about oyster bars. It's also why the Knicks are called the Knicks, despite the fact that nobody under 90 uses the full word anymore. And yet, none of these stuck like the Big Apple, a name that sounds delicious, vaguely threatening, and entirely unearned. But if you're into bizarre symbols, don't worry. The city has plenty, including 2 stone lions that have been silently judging everyone for over a century. The word Gotham was first applied to New York City by Washington Irving in 1807. Before Gotham was a city tormented by supervillains, it was just an 1807 insult with literary flair. Washington Irving, yes, the guy who wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, first labeled New York Gotham in a satirical essay. The name referenced a legendary English village of fools who acted dumb to avoid royal attention. Irving's implication? New Yorkers were either stupid or pretending to be so they wouldn't have to deal with the government. In retrospect, not much has changed. But irony is New York's preferred currency, and so the name stuck. First as a joke, then as an identity. Over time, Gotham evolved into something darker, cooler, and grittier. Thanks to comic books, it now evokes a place where it's always midnight, the alleys are always damp, and someone's always monologuing from a rooftop, which again is not entirely inaccurate. Irving's Gotham was never meant as a compliment, but New Yorkers took it, slapped it on t-shirts, and made it sound mythic. That's the New York way. Take an insult, turn it iconic, and sell it for $29.99. Speaking of mythic icons, the next ones are carved in stone, don't blink, and might secretly know all your overdue books. The New York Public Library's main branch is guarded by 2 stone lions named Patience and Fortitude. Guarding the entrance to the New York Public Library's main branch like 2 very serious bouncers at an Ivy League nightclub are Patience and Fortitude, the city's most respected lions who haven't eaten anyone in over 100 years. Carved in Tennessee marble and perched at 5th Avenue and 42nd Street, they sit with a level of dignified judgment usually reserved for grandparents and DMV employees. And yes, they have names, because this is New York. And even our statues have personalities. Originally dubbed Leo Astor and Leo Lenox, after the library's founders, the lions were renamed during the Great Depression by then-Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, who wanted them to represent the qualities New Yorkers needed most: patience and fortitude. 2 things you'll require in heavy doses, whether you're standing in line at Trader Joe's or trying to find seating on the 6 train. These lions have seen it all: wars, protests, weddings, the rise and fall of bagel trends. They've become city mascots, photobombed by tourists daily, and silently remind us that wisdom starts with silence and ends in overdue fines. But beneath their noble paws lies something even stranger: a hidden railway platform built for a president with wheels. Underneath the Waldorf Astoria, there's a secret train platform, Track 61, said to have been used by Franklin D. Roosevelt. Beneath the glamour of the Waldorf Astoria, where jazz played and champagne flowed, lurks something much grittier. Track 61, an abandoned train platform that sounds like the setting for a noir thriller and may have once doubled as the presidential Batcave. Legend has it that Franklin D. Roosevelt used the platform to discreetly enter the hotel while hiding his polio from the public eye. Because in 1940s America, mobility aids were somehow seen as a national security risk. Roosevelt would allegedly roll his custom Pierce Arrow limousine straight onto the train car, be whisked into Manhattan, and emerge in the belly of the Waldorf, out of view. It was the original stealth mode before tinted SUVs and back alley entrances became standard political fare. Whether or not the full legend holds up under historical scrutiny, the track is real, the elevator's real, and the vibe down there is pure spy thriller. It's an underground relic of a time when even presidential vulnerability had to be hidden under marble floors and chandeliers. Of course, not all secret plots take place in train tunnels. Some happen in checkered squares, under chandeliers, at tables with clock timers, and the very first national championship of such battles, right here in New York. The first American chess championship was held in New York City in 1857. Before speed chess went viral on streaming platforms and Magnus Carlsen became the Tom Brady of pawns, there was the 1857 American Chess Congress, a gentleman's brawl of brains held in New York City. No TikToks, no trash talk, no Queen's Gambit cosplay. Just waistcoats, cigars, and enough silent intensity to cause spontaneous nosebleeds. Hosted at the Des Moines Chess Club, kidding, it was actually at the Des Combs Rooms on Broadway. The event was the first of its kind in the U.S., and it crowned a young Paul Morphy as champion. Morphy, a New Orleans prodigy, casually wiped the floor with his opponents, dazzling the New York elite and setting a precedent for chess being both a refined pursuit and an ego demolition derby. The matches were followed breathlessly in the papers, because this was a time when chess was still mysterious and carried the air of international espionage. In a city built on strategy, misdirection, and occasionally flipping the board, it fit perfectly. And like all things in New York, the drama didn't stop when the game did. Because right after chess came something louder, faster, and infinitely more rickety. A wooden scream machine by the sea. The Coney Island Cyclone roller coaster, built in 1927, is a designated New York City landmark. Coney Island, home of cotton candy, questionable tattoos, and the Cyclone, a wooden roller coaster that's been rattling spines and challenging life insurance policies since 1927. Built during a time when engineering standards were best described as it'll hold, the Cyclone has somehow survived world wars, hurricanes, urban decay, and generations of screaming children who left their dignity back at the ticket booth. Riding the Cyclone is less of an amusement experience and more of a chiropractic event. It lurches, it bucks, it creaks in a way that makes you question every decision you've ever made. And yet, there's something undeniably magical about it. Maybe it's the smell of salt water mixed with hot dogs. Maybe it's the brief, existential clarity you get at the peak before you plunge toward what feels like certain doom. In 1988, the Cyclone was officially designated a New York City landmark, which basically means, yes, we know it's terrifying, but we're keeping it. Because some relics are too beloved to replace, even if they give you a herniated disc. And speaking of things that rattle, the next fact involves one of the first times New York forced people to slap numbers on their newfangled death machines. New York was the first state to require license plates for automobiles, starting in 1901. Back in 1901, the automobile was still a novelty, basically a loud metal box with wheels and an attitude problem. And because this was New York, where chaos must eventually be cataloged, the state stepped in and said, "You know what these things need? Identification." Thus, license plates were born, or rather, license numbers, because at first, drivers had to make their own plates and paint the numbers on themselves. Imagine Etsy meets the DMV. This meant that your car's plate could be anything from a hand-carved wooden sign to some sloppily painted tin nailed to your bumper with hope and rust. It wasn't until later that the state began issuing standardized plates, and even then, enforcement was as spotty as a Soho art gallery schedule. But make no mistake, this was the beginning of bureaucracy's beautiful relationship with the automobile. The start of every parking ticket, every toll violation, every existential scream yelled through a windshield. And of course, it all happened here first. Because if there's one thing New York knows how to do, it's regulate your freedom with paperwork. Now let's talk about a skyscraper so massive, so extra, that it literally has its own zip code. Because why share when you can dominate? The Empire State Building has its own zip code. There are buildings, there are tall buildings, and then there's the Empire State Building, which decided to be so important it got its very own zip code, 10118. That's right, this architectural diva doesn't just rise above the skyline, it rises above the postal system. When you're that iconic, you don't share mail space with the peasants. Completed in 1931, in the middle of the Great Depression, the Empire State Building was part act of hope, part act of defiance, and part colossal middle finger to gravity. It was the tallest building in the world for nearly 40 years, and even now, it has more star power than most of the celebrities who visit it. It's been climbed by King Kong, fictionally, struck by lightning hundreds of times, literally, and appeared in more movies than some Academy Award winners. But the zip code is what really seals its diva status. It means when you send a letter there, it doesn't go to a floor. It goes to a realm, a vertical kingdom of suits, tourists, and confused delivery drivers. And while the building soars above, down below runs a subway system so relentless, so mercilessly eternal, that not even a holiday can stop its grind. New York City's subway system operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with very few exceptions. The New York City subway doesn't sleep. It doesn't pause. It doesn't apologize. It just keeps going. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like a caffeinated goblin dragging 8 million souls from point A to point B with varying degrees of efficiency, climate control, and despair. While other cities tuck their trains into bed by midnight, New York's subway lurches onward, full of performers, prophets, and people eating entire rotisserie chickens with no shame. It's a miracle of motion, and also a museum of chaos. One moment you're being serenaded by a mariachi band, the next you're watching someone do pull-ups on the handrails like it's an Olympic qualifier. It's hot in the winter, cold in the summer, and always smells like betrayal. But it's there, always. Through blizzards, blackouts, and existential crises. Of course, it's not without its quirks. Weekend service changes are basically a form of psychological warfare. Sometimes the train skips your stop. Sometimes it skips reality. But it never fully shuts down, because this is New York, and the grind never ends. And speaking of relentless grinds, the city's financial beating heart started with something far more humble, a tree and a handshake. The New York Stock Exchange originated under a buttonwood tree on Wall Street in 1792. Before it became a towering monument to capitalism, the New York Stock Exchange began as a group of men doing deals under a buttonwood tree on Wall Street. It was 1792, and they called it the Buttonwood Agreement, because nothing screams "trust us with your money" like naming your financial pact after foliage. There were no trading floors, no screens flashing red, no billion-dollar algorithms, just 24 brokers agreeing not to screw each other over too blatantly. That tree, it stood where the financial world would eventually build its empire of credit, debt, and expensive suits. The irony of it all is that this mighty economic machine had the same origin story as a lemonade stand. Outdoors, minimal oversight, and suspicious optimism. Over time, that humble start mutated into the most watched, feared, and misunderstood institution on the planet. Stocks were born, fortunes rose, fortunes died. The tree got paved over. And somewhere along the way, a nation fell in love with numbers it didn't fully understand. Of course, financial madness wasn't the only thing that caught on like wildfire. Some inventions were sweeter, softer, and far more edible, especially once they snuck into every New York kitchen. Let's talk cookies. The first chocolate chip cookie was invented in 1938 by Ruth Graves Wakefield, but it quickly became an NYC staple. Technically, the first chocolate chip cookie was born in Massachusetts. But like many great American icons, bagels, comedians, and regret, it found its spiritual home in New York City. Ruth Graves Wakefield, the woman responsible for this divine accident, was trying to make chocolate cookies when the chips refused to melt. And thus, like most greatness, It was born from stubbornness and baking chaos. New York took the cookie and turned it into a ritual. Fancy bakeries churn out $8 versions the size of hubcaps. Bodegas sell them too for $1, slightly stale but blessed by the gods of convenience. There's something deeply New York about the cookie. Unpretentious, highly adaptable, and better with a coffee. Chocolate chip cookies became the city's edible apology. Breakups, layoffs, I'm sorry I ghosted you for 6 weeks, all softened by a bag of warm, gooey distraction. And because this is New York, someone out there has probably tried to make it gluten-free, dairy-free, and emotionally unavailable. But if you're done chewing on comfort, listen carefully. There's a whisper in the walls of Grand Central, and it knows your secrets, or at least your coffee order. Grand Central Terminal has a whispering gallery. Welcome to Grand Central Terminal, the city's majestic train hub where thousands hustle, shuffle, and scream into their phones every day. But hidden beneath its soaring ceilings and marble staircases lies a secret so subtle it might make you question reality, or your hearing. The Whispering Gallery, a spot near the Oyster Bar where you can stand in one corner, whisper something, and someone standing diagonally across will hear you perfectly clear, no matter the crowd. This acoustic oddity is less the work of architectural genius and more a happy accident of design, but it's become one of the city's favorite secrets. Tourists flock here to test the magic. Couples use it to share conspiratorial sweet nothings, and pranksters whisper spoilers about Broadway shows to unsuspecting strangers. It's fitting, really. In a city where everyone is talking at once but no one listens, here's a place where whispers travel far, reminding us that even in the chaos, some secrets slip through. And speaking of boroughs, not all parts of New York are islands or peninsulas. Some are a bit more grounded. The Bronx is New York City's only borough that is primarily on the mainland. Most of New York's boroughs are islands or peninsulas floating in the Atlantic. Concrete and steel surrounded by water and the occasional seagull stealing your lunch. But the Bronx stands alone, literally rooted in the mainland of the United States. This means you can drive to the Bronx without crossing a single bridge or tunnel, an odd geographical distinction in a city famed for its waterways and ferries. Known as the boogie down to locals, the Bronx is a borough of contradictions. It's the birthplace of hip-hop, home to Yankee Stadium, and the site of sprawling parks like Pelham Bay, larger than Central Park itself. Yet it's often overshadowed by its glitzier siblings across the water. The Bronx's mainland status gives it a different vibe, less tourist traffic, more grit, and a fierce local pride. It's a place where you can smell the ocean breeze and the smell of street food vendors in the same breath. But unlike other boroughs, it also guards a treasure that many don't realize it holds, an original copy of one of America's most sacred documents. The New York Public Library has an original copy of the Declaration of Independence. Forget the dusty off-limits archives you imagine. The New York Public Library's main branch is a fortress of knowledge, and one of its crown jewels is an original copy of the Declaration of Independence. Yes, tucked amid sprawling reading rooms, marble lions, and thousands of overdue fines sits a document that helped birth a nation. This isn't just a piece of old parchment. It's a symbol of rebellion, ideals, and the messy business of freedom. The library's copy is one of only a handful of surviving Dunlap broadsides printed the night the Declaration was first signed in 1776. It's a rare, tangible connection to a time when the word freedom was both hope and high-stakes gamble. New Yorkers might be known for cynicism, but when you stand in that room, staring at those faded words, you catch a glimpse of something bigger. A reminder that this city and this country was built on bold ideas, messy compromises, and a whole lot of stubborn will. But if you think the library is quiet, just wait until you hear about the oldest bar in New York, which refused to admit women until the 1970s. New York City's oldest continuously operating bar, McSorley's Old Ale House, Opened in 1854 and didn't admit women until 1970. Step into McSorley's old ale house, and you're stepping into a time capsule where the air smells of sawdust, stale beer, and the ghosts of centuries-old debauchery. Founded in 1854, it's New York City's oldest continuously operating bar. A place where generations of rough-and-ready New Yorkers spilled their stories and their drinks, long before craft cocktails made hipster a thing. But here's the kicker. For over a century, McSorley's didn't admit women. That's right. Women were banned from the joint until 1970, which means it took well over 100 years for anyone to challenge the idea that ale was an exclusively male province. The bar's defenders claimed it was tradition. Feminists called it institutionalized nonsense. When the New York State Liquor Authority finally intervened, the place reluctantly relented, opening its doors to everyone who wanted to take a swig of history. Walking in now, you still feel the weight of its masculine past. The bare wooden tables, the sawdust floors, the portraits of dusty old-timers hanging like sentinels. McSorley's is less a bar and more a monument to a bygone era, a reminder that New York's history isn't always glamorous, but it sure is persistent. And if you thought that was old school, wait until you hear about a bridge that once stretched longer than anything else on the planet. The Brooklyn Bridge, when completed in 1883, was the longest suspension bridge in the world. The Brooklyn Bridge isn't just a way to get from Manhattan to Brooklyn. It's a colossal steel and stone love letter to human ambition, stubbornness, and spectacular hubris. When it opened in 1883, it was the longest suspension bridge on Earth, spanning 1,595 feet over the East River, and forever changing New York's skyline and its commute. Building it was a feat of engineering, political drama, and tragic sacrifice. Chief Engineer John A. Roebling died of tetanus before the project even began, and his son Washington Roebling took over, only to be sidelined by caisson disease, now known as decompression sickness. But through sheer will and some family heroics involving Washington's wife, Emily, the bridge was completed. It was part monument, part miracle, and part terrifying daredevil's dream. The bridge was immediately a sensation, a symbol of progress and unity, connecting two boroughs that had felt like worlds apart. Walking across it today, surrounded by tourists and selfie sticks, you can almost hear the echoes of horse-drawn carriages and the clatter of early cable cars. And while the bridge is still a New York icon, it shares that status with another kind of showstopper, one where dogs take center stage. The first national dog show in the U.S. was held in New York City in 1877, leading to the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show. Before the Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show became the event where poodles and pugs strut like they own the place, it all started in New York City with the first national dog show in 1877. Picture a grand hall filled with people decked out in Victorian finery, critiquing dogs on their fluff, posture, and sheer attitude. Because in New York, even the canines are judged to the hilt. The show was born out of a fascination with pedigree and performance, and it quickly became a social event where the city's elite could parade their pooches like prized paintings. The Westminster Show, which began just a year later, took that passion and turned it into a tradition. Today, it's the Super Bowl of dog shows, with handlers sweating bullets and dogs preening like they're auditioning for Broadway. The spectacle reflects New York's unique blend of high society and absurdity. Somewhere between the meticulously groomed poodles and the distracted spectators is a city that thrives on competition, spectacle, and let's face it, showing off. Speaking of showing off, nothing said New York theater like the first permanent theater that helped turn the city into a stage. The New York Public Library has an original copy of the Gutenberg Bible. Tucked amid the hushed reading rooms, marble lions, and the omnipresent scent of overdue fines at the New York Public Library's main branch lies a treasure so old it predates America's founding fathers, an original copy of the Gutenberg Bible. Yes, among the millions of checkouts, research requests, and occasional pigeons slipping through faulty windows, you'll find the 42-line Latin Bible printed around 1455, the first major book produced with movable type in the West. Picture it. Johannes Gutenberg's press in Mainz, Germany, churning out pages in black-letter script, while centuries later, New York librarians cradle these fragile folios as if they were newborn alleluias. This isn't just an artifact. It's a symbol of knowledge unleashed, a 600-year-old manifesto for mass communication. The pages are so delicate that they're kept in a dark, climate-controlled vault, because apparently even Bibles get stage fright. Visitors can't just stroll in and borrow it for a weekend. You need special permission, an appointment, and possibly a blood oath. Yet knowing it's there gives the library an air of holy secrecy. It's a reminder that beneath every overdue notice lies a continuum of human curiosity, from scribes laboring over vellum to you Googling, "When's the library open?" But if you think ancient books are the city's only epic narratives, wait till you hear about the daring flight that leapt off Long Island and captured the world's imagination. The Spirit of St. Louis departed from Roosevelt Field in Long Island for its historic transatlantic flight. Long before jet lag was a global epidemic, Charles Lindbergh strapped himself into a single-seat monoplane with a name so aspirational it could double as a motivational poster. The Spirit of St. Louis. While the plane was assembled thousands of miles away in a San Diego factory, its moment of truth came on May 20th, 1927, as it rolled out of Roosevelt Field on Long Island, New York. With no autopilot, no parachute, and questionable in-flight snacks, Lindbergh took off into the Atlantic, bound for Paris. Roosevelt Field wasn't just an airstrip. It was the launch pad for audacious dreams. Locals gathered at dawn, wearing fedoras and pince-nez glasses, watching a lone man defy logic and geography. When Lindbergh finally landed in Le Bourget Airport, he'd flown 3,600 miles nonstop, becoming the first person to solo the Atlantic. The world collectively lost its mind. Ticker tape parades, ticker tape newspapers, ticker tapes everywhere. Today, Roosevelt Field is a shopping mall. Ironic, given the original spirit involved less bargain hunting and more sheer nerve. But if you close your eyes at the food court, you can almost hear propellers whirring above the scent of pretzels. And while Lindbergh conquered the skies, the city below was already cramming more people onto its sidewalks than seemed physically possible. Speaking of sardine can proportions, up next we'll dive into the mind-bending density that makes New York feel like one giant crowded subway car. New York City's population density is among the highest in the United States. You think your apartment's cramped? Try fitting over 27,000 people into 1 square mile, the approximate density of Manhattan, without anyone moving for the bathroom. New York City consistently ranks among the densest cities in the country, and when you factor in the other 4 boroughs, you get a blend of vertical living, sidewalk congestion, and that delightful stew of human ambition. High-rise towers sprout like concrete mushrooms, each floor stacked with residents who shower, cook, and occasionally duel over hallway package deliveries. Street vendors, tourists with selfie sticks, and office workers on caffeine withdrawal collide on sidewalks so narrow that you sometimes question whether elbow pads should be mandatory. This density fuels the city's electric pulse. 24-hour pizza joints, standing room-only comedy clubs, and the constant hum of a million dreams clashing in real time. Sure, sardine cans in a can might seem claustrophobic, but it also means your friends are just a flight of stairs away, if the elevator isn't on overload. Yet, for all its packed sidewalks and teetering towers, New York's true density lies in its ideas, culture, and history. And speaking of history, up next is the tale of a pioneering physicist who bent light itself just across the Hudson, forever altering our grasp of reality. The first permanent theater in New York was the Nassau Street Theater, which opened in 1750. Before Broadway was the glittering beast we know today, New York had the Nassau Street Theater, a modest wooden box that opened its doors in 1750. This was the city's first permanent theater, a place where colonists went to watch everything from Shakespearean tragedies to scandalous comedies, and occasionally to pretend they weren't worried about taxes or the British Empire breathing down their necks. Nassau Street Theater was far from the Broadway extravaganzas we envy today. It was a simple, often drafty hall where actors performed on a makeshift stage lit by candles and oil lamps. Audience members, meanwhile, were just as likely to heckle, snack, or nap during the show. Theater was entertainment, yes, but it was also a messy social affair, sometimes highbrow, often just a chance to gossip and drink. The theater laid the groundwork for New York's rich performing arts culture, eventually morphing into the world's capital for all things dramatic. But in 1750, it was a humble experiment. A wooden building in a colonial city that barely knew it would become a global cultural titan. And speaking of firsts, New York was also first in ratifying the Constitution, setting the stage for national drama of a different kind. New York was the first state to ratify the U.S. Constitution, though a different state holds the record for first state to sign. In the high-stakes political drama of 1788, New York proudly became the first state to ratify the U.S. Constitution, setting the foundation for the fledgling nation's government. This wasn't a unanimous or easy decision. New Yorkers were split between Federalists who wanted a strong central government and Anti-Federalists wary of giving too much power to the elites. The city was alive with fiery debates, pamphlets, and no doubt, plenty of whiskey-fueled arguments in taverns. While Delaware technically gets credit for being the first to sign the Constitution, New York's ratification was a major symbolic moment. It was the city's way of saying, "Okay, we're in." This endorsement helped calm nerves across the states and propel the new government from theory into action. And of course, being New York, the whole process was as messy and dramatic as a Shakespeare play, with more plot twists than most political dramas today. From ratifying a nation's blueprint to lighting the city with holiday cheer, New York knows how to start traditions that stick like gum on a subway seat. The Rockefeller Center Christmas tree tradition began in 1931 with construction workers putting up a small tree. Christmas in New York City isn't just a season. It's a full-blown spectacle that makes even the grinchiest subway rider crack a smile, or at least try to. And it all started in 1931. Right in the heart of Rockefeller Center. During the brutal Great Depression, construction workers decided to boost morale by erecting a modest Christmas tree on the site of the unfinished skyscraper. What began as a humble, slightly scraggly pine decked out with handmade decorations quickly blossomed into a legendary tradition that would become a symbol of hope, resilience, and the city's stubborn refusal to be defeated by hard times. The Rockefeller Center Christmas tree is now a massive Norway spruce, bedecked with thousands of lights, attracting millions of tourists and turning Midtown into a winter wonderland every year. It's a tradition full of irony, sparkling opulence born during economic despair, a massive corporate display that somehow still manages to feel like a warm neighborhood ritual. And while the tree glows, the neighborhood's theater scene waits in the wings, ready to launch the dreams of countless performers at a place where amateur nights became legendary. The famous Apollo Theater in Harlem has an amateur night where many stars got their start. If you think fame in New York happens by accident, think again. The Apollo Theater in Harlem, opened in 1914, has been the city's launchpad for countless legends, thanks largely to its infamous amateur night. Imagine a packed house, the crowd roaring with energy, ready to cheer or jeer aspiring singers, comedians, and dancers taking their shot at stardom. It's a pressure cooker where dreams either ignite or combust in spectacular fashion. Amateur night isn't just a talent show, it's a rite of passage, a brutal audition judged by the toughest critics in the world, Harlem's audience. You get booed off stage or you get lifted on shoulders. Names like Ella Fitzgerald, James Brown, and Lauryn Hill all cut their teeth here, proving that Harlem's stage is no place for the faint-hearted. The Apollo's spirit is quintessentially New York. Bold, raw, unforgiving, but with the potential to catapult you from obscurity to legend. And while the theater nurtures stars, just a few blocks away lies a slice of New York so tiny and strange it could disappear under a New Yorker's shoe. The smallest piece of privately owned land in New York City is Hess Triangle in Greenwich Village. Forget skyscrapers and sprawling parks. The tiniest private land in New York is a tiny triangular patch called Hess Triangle, nestled in Greenwich Village. Measuring just 500 square inches, about the size of a small pizza, this quirky plot is the city's smallest piece of privately owned land. It was born out of a street-widening project in the early 1900s when the city tried to claim the block. But a clever property owner held on to this minuscule slice. Instead of surrendering, the owner cemented a mosaic tile into the sidewalk that reads, "Property of the Hess Estate, which has never been dedicated for public purpose." It's like a middle finger in mosaic form, a tiny, stubborn relic of defiance in a city that often swallows everything whole. Hess Triangle reminds us that in New York, even the smallest spaces carry stories of rebellion, ownership, and identity. And if you think that patch is odd, wait until you learn about a place that belongs to no one, a global island right in the city's backyard. The UN headquarters in New York City is considered international territory. The United Nations headquarters in Manhattan is one of the few places in New York that doesn't technically belong to the city, the state, or even the United States. It's international territory, a piece of global real estate where diplomats from around the world negotiate, debate, and sometimes just try not to lose their tempers. Opened in 1952, the UN headquarters is a diplomatic fortress, surrounded by security, secrecy, and a symbolic aura of peace and bureaucratic slog. It's the physical embodiment of New York's role as a world capital, not just for finance or culture, but for diplomacy and global politics. Walking its halls, you're reminded of the city's paradox. A place bustling with ambition and noise also holds a rare space dedicated to dialogue and hope, even if the talks often end in deadlock or grandstanding. It's a city that can host the world's chaos and still find moments of calm. And speaking of places that brought global ideas to life, the next fact dives into where the first American golf course took root, right near New York City. The first American golf course was built in Yonkers, New York in 1888. Golf in New York might seem like an unlikely pairing, a sport of quiet greens and whispering woods meeting a city known for its relentless noise and concrete jungles. Yet, the very first American golf course opened in 1888 in Yonkers, just a stone's throw from Manhattan. This early course was less about high-end country clubs and more about pioneers trying to plant some leisure into the frantic pace of urban life. The Yonkers Golf Club was where wealthy New Yorkers began trading their silk hats for golf caps, discovering that swinging a club could be as much a social statement as a sport. It introduced America to golf etiquette, lush fairways, and the eternal frustration of chasing a tiny ball into the rough and beyond. This first course marked a shift in leisure culture, an early attempt to blend nature and sport into a growing metropolis that was otherwise all steel and steam. It might not have had the glamour of Pebble Beach or Augusta, but it set the stage for golf's slow crawl into American mainstream. And while golf tees off quietly, New York's sports scene is anything but subtle, especially when it comes to its legendary baseball team. The New York Yankees have won more World Series championships than any other team in Major League Baseball. The New York Yankees are less a baseball team and more an institution, an empire of pinstripes, swagger, and relentless winning. With 27 World Series titles under their belt, they hold the record for the most championships in Major League Baseball, making their haters everywhere groan in envy and frustration. From Babe Ruth's legendary called shot to Derek Jeter's captaincy, the Yankees are a symbol of dominance, and let's be honest, a little bit of New York arrogance. They have a knack for turning baseball games into grand theater, where every pitch can feel like the fate of the city hangs in the balance. Fans either love them or loathe them, but everyone respects the spectacle. Their stadium, their legacy, and their relentless pursuit of victory have cemented them as the heart of New York sports. If you want quiet modesty, go watch a different sport. But if you want drama, history, and enough superstition to power a soap opera, the Yankees deliver every season. And speaking of large dominating forces, New York's waterways hide a canal system so extensive it puts one of the world's engineering marvels to shame. The New York State Barge Canal system is longer than the Panama Canal. Most people think of the Panama Canal as the world's crown jewel of waterways, a tiny man-made marvel connecting oceans. But New York State has its own impressive aquatic network, the Barge Canal System, which stretches longer than the Panama Canal and plays a surprisingly crucial role in the region's commerce and history. The canal system connects the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean via the Hudson River, creating a vast inland waterway that has allowed goods to move efficiently since the early 20th century. It was a game changer, turning New York into a commercial powerhouse by opening trade routes that were once blocked by geography. The engineering feat involved rerouting rivers, digging channels, and building locks, all of which transformed the landscape and economy. While it might not get the Hollywood spotlight like the Panama Canal, the Barge Canal is a silent giant of infrastructure, quietly facilitating trade and reminding us that sometimes the best transportation happens on water, not wheels. And while these waterways are crucial for commerce, some of New York's most surprising modern developments turn abandoned railroads into elevated parks. The High Line, an elevated park in Manhattan, was built on a historic freight rail line. Imagine a disused, elevated railway track, once chugging with freight cars hauling goods through Manhattan's meatpacking district, now transformed into one of New York City's most unexpected and beloved parks. That's the High Line, a 1.45-mile stretch of green oasis, art installations, and panoramic city views suspended above the streets below. Originally built in the 1930s to lift dangerous freight trains off Manhattan streets, the rail line had become obsolete by the 1980s, left to rust and decay. But instead of tearing it down, visionary community activists and city planners saw potential in the forgotten structure. Their fight turned an industrial relic into a vibrant public space that redefined urban renewal. Today, the High Line is a place where tourists stroll alongside locals and wildflowers bloom amid graffiti and steel beams. It's an ironic twist. This once purely functional freight path has become a leisurely escape for New Yorkers needing a break from the city's relentless pace. The park also sparked a real estate boom in the surrounding neighborhoods, proving that even abandoned railroads can turn into gold. Speaking of New York's towering ambitions, the city's skyline boasts over 6,000 high-rise buildings, each a monument to ambition and a testament to the city that never stops building. New York City has over 6,000 high-rise buildings. If you think skyscrapers are just tall buildings, think again. New York City is a vertical kingdom with more than 6,000 high-rises piercing its skyline. From the iconic Empire State Building to glass giants like One World Trade Center, the city is a dense forest of steel and glass, each structure vying for its place in history and the sky. These high-rises aren't just feats of engineering. They're symbols of power, ambition, and the unrelenting desire to cram as many people and businesses as possible into a limited footprint. Manhattan's famous grid, combined with sky-high zoning laws, has created a skyline that's both chaotic and breathtaking. Each building tells a story of economic booms, crashes, architectural styles, and sometimes disasters. And while some towers scream modernity, others cling to Art Deco elegance, reminding us that New York's skyline is a living museum of styles competing for attention. But the city's love affair with vertical grandeur isn't just about living or working. It's also about entertainment, especially on the stages of Broadway, where the longest-running show holds a record as tall as the buildings themselves. The longest-running show in Broadway history is The Phantom of the Opera, which premiered in 1988. Broadway is synonymous with spectacle, drama, and dreams, But no show embodies this better than The Phantom of the Opera. Premiering in 1988, it holds the record as Broadway's longest-running production, a Gothic romance soaked in mystery, mass, and unforgettable tunes. The show's haunting score and dramatic story about love and obsession beneath the Paris Opera House captivated audiences night after night, turning Phantom into a theatrical phenomenon. Its longevity is a testament to New York's enduring appetite for stories that blend grandeur with dark, emotional complexity. For nearly 3 decades, Phantom has drawn millions, making the Majestic Theater one of the most iconic performance spaces in the city. It's a reminder that even in a city obsessed with novelty and speed, some stories resonate long after the final curtain. And if you think that's impressive, wait until you hear about the birthplace of television itself. Because New York has always been a city ahead of its time, even when that time was just flickering images on a tiny screen. The first successful demonstration of television was in New York City in 1927. Before the era of binge-watching, streaming, and the endless scroll of cat videos, television was just a wild idea, a blurry dream of moving pictures transmitted through the air. In 1927, New York City became the unlikely birthplace of this groundbreaking invention, hosting the first successful demonstration of television. This wasn't the sleek, high-definition experience we know today. It was more like watching ghosts perform amateur theater on a tiny screen. Inventors like Philo Farnsworth and John Logie Baird were racing to bring images to life, and New York, ever the incubator of innovation, provided the stage. The demonstration involved crude mechanical scanning, low-resolution images, and a technology that seemed almost magical to the audiences. Skeptics scoffed, while visionaries saw the dawn of a new communication era. It was a quiet revolution, one that would go on to reshape entertainment, politics, and culture worldwide. New Yorkers may not have had flat screens in their living rooms yet, but this city planted the seed that grew into the media empire we're glued to today. And speaking of invention, the man who dreamed up the Ferris wheel was born in a New York town with a name almost too perfect for a fairy tale. The inventor of the Ferris wheel, George Washington Gale Ferris Jr., was born in Galesburg, New York. George Washington Gale Ferris Jr., a name that sounds like it was plucked straight from a 19th century history book, was born in Galesburg, New York. He's best known for engineering the original Ferris wheel, a giant rotating symbol of fun, fear, and dizzying heights that debuted at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. But before his moment of fame, Ferris was a New Yorker by birth, raised in a state that's home to a surprising number of inventors and dreamers. The Ferris wheel was born out of competition. At the time, Chicago wanted to rival the Eiffel Tower's glory from the 1889 Paris Expo, and Ferris rose to the challenge with his mechanical giant. The wheel's massive structure was both an engineering marvel and a spectacle, offering panoramic views and spinning riders into fits of both delight and terror. Though Ferris spent much of his career outside New York, his roots were in the Empire State, a fitting birthplace for a man whose invention would go on to become a global icon of fairs, carnivals, and urban skylines. And if you think New York's love affair with pizza is just a recent fad, think again. The first pizza slice was sold in New York City in 1905. In 1905, the first slice of pizza was sold in New York City, marking the beginning of a culinary obsession that would become as legendary as the city itself. While pizza originated in Italy, it was in the immigrant neighborhoods of New York where this humble pie was sliced, served, and elevated to fast food superstardom. Pizza slices were perfect for the fast-paced lifestyle of working-class New Yorkers, cheap, portable, and infinitely customizable. The idea of selling pizza by the slice turned what was once a family dinner into street food royalty. Lombardi's, often credited as America's first pizzeria, paved the way for this trend, and soon every borough had its own slice joint, each claiming the best crust, the perfect sauce, or the most authentic cheese. Today, the pizza slice is a cultural icon, a comfort food, and a surprisingly reliable economic indicator. There's even the so-called pizza principle, which suggests that the price of a slice tends to track the cost of a subway ride. From steaming slices to street performers, New York's quirks keep getting weirder. And no one is weirder than Times Square's most famous spectacle, the naked cowboy. The iconic naked cowboy of Times Square performs year-round, rain or shine. If you've ever wandered through Times Square, you've likely encountered the naked cowboy, a New York fixture who's about as subtle as a marching band in a library, clad in nothing but his famous white briefs, cowboy hat, boots, and an acoustic guitar strategically placed. This eccentric performer has been entertaining or bewildering tourists and locals alike for years. The naked cowboy, real name Robert John Burke, started this peculiar brand of street performance in the late 1990s, turning Times Square into his personal stage. Rain or shine, freezing cold or sweltering heat, he strums his guitar, poses for photos, and embraces the city's absurdity with open arms and very little else. He's part tourist attraction, part social experiment, and part living meme, a testament to New York's unique ability to turn eccentricity into celebrity. While some may see him as a joke, others view him as a symbol of fearless self-expression, the kind of strange optimism that keeps New York weird and wonderful. And if you thought Times Square's craziness stopped with half-naked cowboys, wait until you hear about the annual parade that started with live zoo animals and somehow became a national holiday tradition. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade started in 1924 and used live animals from the Central Park Zoo. Every Thanksgiving, millions of people tune in to watch giant balloons float through the streets of New York City. But this beloved tradition had surprisingly humble and wild beginnings. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade kicked off in 1924 with a motley crew of employees, floats, marching bands, and live animals borrowed straight from the Central Park Zoo. Imagine the chaos of elephants, bears, and other exotic creatures marching alongside the Macy's staff, delighting and terrifying crowds at once. It was less polished spectacle and more spontaneous carnival, an event that quickly captured the city's imagination during the Roaring '20s. The use of live animals didn't last forever, thanks, in part, to logistical nightmares and concerns for animal welfare, but it left a legacy of blending the extraordinary with the familiar. Today, the parade is a meticulously choreographed media event featuring huge inflatable characters, celebrity performances, and millions of spectators. Yet, underneath the glitter and helium, it's a reminder of a city that's always loved mixing spectacle with a little bit of the wild. Speaking of wild, the next fact might surprise you. New York has the largest public library system in the world. New York City has the largest public library system in the world. With more than 92 million items in its collection, New York City's public library system isn't just a place for quiet study. It's the largest in the world. This sprawling network includes over 90 branches scattered across all 5 boroughs, serving millions of residents with books, digital media, community programs, and of course, a haven from the city's relentless noise. The system's flagship, the New York Public Library main branch on Fifth Avenue, is itself a symbol of knowledge and grandeur, guarded by the famous stone lion's patience and fortitude. But beyond its majestic architecture lies a resource that is fiercely democratic. Anyone can borrow books, access rare manuscripts, or attend free lectures. The library system has survived budget crises, wars, and technological revolutions, continually reinventing itself while holding firm to its mission, to provide access to information for all. It stands as a testament to New York's belief in education and opportunity, even amidst chaos. And if you think this system is just about books, wait till you hear about the art museum that broke the mold by dedicating itself exclusively to modern art. The Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, was the first museum dedicated exclusively to modern art. When MoMA opened its doors in 1929, it was a radical idea, an entire museum dedicated solely to modern art. a genre that, at the time, was considered scandalous, confusing, and sometimes downright offensive. While traditional museums clung to Renaissance portraits and classical sculptures, MoMA embraced the avant-garde, the abstract, and the controversial. It was a bold statement by a city that never shied away from shaking things up. MoMA became the home for pioneers like Picasso, Matisse, and Warhol, showcasing works that challenged what art could be. Its exhibitions didn't just display paintings and sculptures, they provoked debates about the very nature of creativity and culture. For a city obsessed with reinvention, MoMA's mission fit perfectly, turning art into a reflection of modern life's chaos, beauty, and contradictions. Today, the museum is a beacon for art lovers worldwide, a place where every corner holds the potential to challenge your assumptions. MoMA isn't just a building. It's a testament to New York's role as a cultural provocateur. And while art thrives indoors, New York's energy pulses outdoors, especially in the wildest race on its streets. The New York City Marathon is one of the largest marathons in the world. Every November, the streets of New York City transform into a sprawling, colorful river of determined runners, elite athletes, and enthusiastic spectators. The New York City Marathon is more than a race. It's a testament to human endurance and the city's unique ability to bring together people from every corner of the globe. Founded in 1970 with just 127 participants running loops in Central Park, the marathon has exploded into a massive event, weaving through all 5 boroughs. The course takes runners from Staten Island through Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Manhattan, showcasing the city's diverse neighborhoods and cultures. It's a grueling 26.2 miles of sweat, grit, and sheer willpower. For many, the marathon is a personal milestone. For New York, it's a vibrant celebration of resilience and community. Crowds line the streets, cheering on total strangers with signs, cowbells, and contagious energy. The marathon reflects the city's spirit, relentless, diverse, and always moving forward. And speaking of movement, New York was also home to some of the earliest rules trying to tame the wild new craze of automobiles. The first speed limit for cars was introduced in New York City in 1904, 8 miles per hour. Before speed limits were etched into law and traffic cameras lurked on every corner, New York City set a pioneering precedent in 1904 by introducing one of the country's first speed limits, a blistering 8 miles per hour. Yes, 8 mph, the kind of pace that today might make you late for brunch, but back then was seen as necessary to keep streets safe. The arrival of automobiles had thrown the city into confusion. Horse-drawn carriages, streetcars, pedestrians, and these noisy new horseless carriages all jostled for space. City officials panicked at the chaos and decided that an 8 miles per hour cap would save lives and prevent accidents, though enforcement was patchy, and plenty of drivers treated the limit as a polite suggestion. This early speed limit marked the beginning of New York's complicated dance with traffic laws, a story that continues today amid honking horns and gridlock. The city has always been about speed and survival, balancing innovation with regulation. And while cars buzzed above, New York was cultivating a treasure beneath its streets, one of the most famous botanical gardens in the nation. The New York Botanical Garden in the Bronx is a National Historic Landmark. Nestled in the Bronx, the New York Botanical Garden is more than just a collection of plants. It's a sprawling sanctuary of greenery and history, officially recognized as a National Historic Landmark. Founded in 1891, the garden was created to be a living museum, a place where science, education, and beauty converge, all within the urban jungle. Spanning 250 acres, it features thousands of plant species, dramatic landscapes, and a Victorian-style glass conservatory that transports visitors into a world of tropical palms and orchids. It's a place where students study botany, families picnic on the lawns, and New Yorkers escape the city's relentless concrete and noise. The garden's design and preservation efforts showcase the city's commitment to balancing urban growth with nature. It's a reminder that even in the densest metropolis, life finds a way to breathe, bloom, and inspire. And if you think the beauty stops there, wait until you see the cloisters, a branch of the Met dedicated entirely to medieval art and architecture, transporting visitors to another time and place. The cloisters, a branch of the Met, is dedicated to the art and architecture of medieval Europe. Perched in Fort Tryon Park, the cloisters is a museum unlike any other. A meticulously reconstructed medieval monastery nestled in Manhattan, dedicated exclusively to medieval art and architecture. Opened in 1938, it is a serene oasis that feels more like a journey back in time than a typical New York museum. Built from elements salvaged from European abbeys and cloisters, the museum immerses visitors in a world of tapestries, illuminated manuscripts, stained glass, and stone arches. Walking through its gardens and halls, you get a rare chance to experience the spiritual and artistic culture of medieval Europe, right in the middle of one of the busiest cities on earth. The cloisters stands out not just for its art, but for its unique atmosphere, a place where time slows and the chaos of New York feels miles away. It's a testament to the city's global reach and its ability to preserve beauty from centuries past. Speaking of phrases with deep roots, the next fact explores a popular saying thought to have originated right in New York's theater district. The phrase, "the show must go on," is said to have originated in New York's theater district. The show must go on, a phrase so ingrained in theater culture it's practically a motto for performers worldwide, has its origins, some say, right here in New York's theater district. The phrase embodies the resilience, determination, and sometimes sheer stubbornness required to keep a production running despite setbacks, disasters waiting in the wings. In a city where the stakes are high and audiences are unforgiving, the phrase became a rallying cry. Whether it was a lead actor falling ill, a set malfunction, or a power outage, the lights had to stay on and the actors had to perform. It's about commitment, professionalism, and the showbiz tenacity that keeps Broadway alive. The phrase has since transcended theater, becoming a metaphor for perseverance in life, business, and just about any situation where giving up isn't an option. It's quintessential New York grit packaged in 4 simple words. And if that grit wasn't bright enough, the city was about to get literally brighter with one of the nation's first streetlights illuminating the way forward. The first streetlights in the U.S. were installed in New York City in 1880. New York City was the pioneer in turning night into day with the first installation of streetlights in the United States back in 1880. Before that, the city's streets were a patchwork of darkness, gas lamps flickering like dying fireflies and leaving pedestrians to navigate a maze of shadows, and occasionally the not-so-welcome surprise of a horse's contribution to the pavement. The introduction of electric streetlights was revolutionary. It wasn't just about safety, though avoiding faceplants and unsavory alley encounters was a definite plus. It was a statement of progress. New Yorkers were embracing technology with the gusto only a city of dreamers and doers could muster. These early lights transformed nightlife, extended business hours, and turned the city into a beacon of modernity. Of course, the lights weren't flawless. Early bulbs exploded, wiring was rudimentary, and maintenance was a constant battle. But the benefits far outweighed the risks, and soon New York set a shining example for cities across the nation. And speaking of lighting the way, the New York City subway's express tracks were the next innovation designed to cut down travel times for restless commuters. The New York City subway's express tracks were an innovative solution to reduce travel times. If you've ever cursed the subway for its endless stops, you might thank the genius of New York's express tracks. These tracks, introduced in the early 20th century, were a game changer, a way to speed up commutes by allowing certain trains to bypass local stops and fly through key sections of the city. The express tracks were born out of necessity. As the subway expanded and millions of New Yorkers depended on it daily, the system had to be efficient or risk chaos. By designating some trains as express, the city created a 2-tier system. Local trains would stop at every station, while express trains would zoom past, cutting travel times dramatically for long-distance riders. This innovation reflected New York's obsession with speed, efficiency, and multitasking, because nobody has time to wait. It also laid the groundwork for one of the world's most complex transit systems, complete with confusing maps and the occasional delayed announcement. But even with its quirks, the express track system has been a vital artery in the city's relentless rhythm. And while trains were racing underground, the Empire State Building was racing skyward in a record-breaking feat of construction speed. The Empire State Building was built in a record-breaking 1 year and 45 days. In an era when skyscrapers are measured in years of construction and billions of dollars, the Empire State Building's birth is a jaw-dropper. Completed in just 1 year and 45 days during the Great Depression, this iconic New York skyscraper is a testament to ambition, efficiency, and probably a lot of caffeine. Construction began in 1930, and despite the massive scale of the project, workers blasted through obstacles like supply chain issues, winter blizzards, and the typical New York City chaos with astonishing speed. At its peak, 3,400 workers labored daily, assembling the 102-story building that would dominate the skyline for decades. This pace was unprecedented, setting a standard for urban construction that combined ingenuity with a sense of urgency. The Empire State Building wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of hope during hard times, a giant middle finger to economic despair, and a bold statement that New York, and America, was still reaching for the stars. But while the building soared, one of its most famous statues started out as a guerrilla art installation that would change the financial district forever. The Charging Bull statue in Bowling Green was originally installed illicitly by the artist. The Charging Bull, that iconic gleaming bronze beast standing defiantly in Bowling Green Park near Wall Street, wasn't part of any official plan. It was guerrilla art, literally dropped in the middle of the night by its creator, Arturo Di Modica, in 1989. Without permits or fanfare, Di Modica hauled the 100-pound sculpture to the spot and left it as a surprise gift to the city, a symbol of resilience and the indomitable spirit of capitalism after the 1987 stock market crash. The city was initially baffled, if not annoyed, at this unauthorized installation. Police even tried to remove the bull, but the public quickly fell in love with it, viewing it as a powerful emblem of strength, aggression, and the fearless chase for fortune. It was a defiant, artful middle finger to authority, fitting perfectly with New York's history of rebellion and hustle. Today, the Charging Bull is one of the city's most photographed spots, a tourist magnet, and a symbol of Wall Street's relentless energy. But if you think that's an isolated symbol of cultural eccentricity, wait until you learn about the surprisingly Irish face of New York's pub scene. New York City has more Irish pubs than Dublin. You might think that the land of St. Patrick's Day parades and Guinness exports, the Emerald Isle itself, would hold the crown for Irish pubs. But surprise, New York City beats Dublin when it comes to sheer numbers of Irish pubs. The Big Apple, with its rich history of Irish immigration, has transformed these watering holes into cultural institutions, where pints flow as freely as stories and grudges. From the iconic McSorley's to countless neighborhood joints scattered across the boroughs, Irish pubs in NYC serve as community hubs, places to gather, bellow a song, and maybe plot a revolution or two. They keep traditions alive with hearty food, live music, and a relentless embrace of the crack. That's Irish for fun, but with a twist of mischief. These pubs are more than places to drink. They're living history. They tell tales of immigrant struggles, political organizing, and the ever-evolving Irish-American identity. If you want a taste of Ireland, you don't need a plane ticket. Just find your way to a pub in the city that never sleeps. And speaking of iconic, no New Yorker's image of the city would be complete without a certain free ferry offering perfect views of Lady Liberty. The Staten Island Ferry is free and offers great views of the Statue of Liberty. One of New York City's best-kept secrets, and possibly the most economical tourist attraction, is the Staten Island Ferry. Not only is it free, but it offers spectacular views of the Statue of Liberty, Manhattan's skyline, and the harbor's bustling traffic. It's the commuter's favorite way to get between Staten Island and Manhattan, but for visitors, it's an unbeatable way to see the city's landmarks without breaking the bank. The ferry has been running since the early 1900s, a reliable lifeline for Staten Islanders and a favorite for photographers, romantics, and anyone who appreciates a breeze with their skyline. Unlike the crowded and costly cruises, the Staten Island Ferry is spacious, steady, and, well, free, making it the perfect spot for impromptu sightseeing or escape from the city's claustrophobic subway cars. Riding the ferry is a quintessential New York experience, gritty, practical, and unexpectedly beautiful. And once you've taken in the views, you might be ready to dive into the city's pop culture scene, where one event reigns supreme for nerds and celebrities alike. The New York Comic Con is one of the largest pop culture conventions in the world. If you think New York is all business suits and subway rush hours, think again. Every October, the city transforms into a vibrant playground for pop culture geeks, comic book fanatics, cosplay wizards, and celebrity stalkers at the New York Comic Con. It's one of the largest conventions of its kind globally, attracting hundreds of thousands of attendees who come to celebrate everything from superheroes to sci-fi, anime to indie games. Started in 2006, the event has grown into a massive spectacle filled with exclusive reveals, panels featuring Hollywood stars, and endless aisles of merchandise. The convention is a smorgasbord of creativity and fandom, where people don elaborate costumes that rival Broadway productions and queue for hours just to get a glimpse of their favorite creators. New York Comic Con is more than just a fan fest. It's a cultural phenomenon that underscores the city's role as a hub for creativity and diversity. Whether you're a hardcore collector or a casual visitor, the event captures the city's boundless energy and appetite for the extraordinary. And speaking of legendary venues and homegrown legends, nothing says New York sports like the Yankees' sacred grounds. The original Yankee Stadium, the house that Ruth built, opened in 1923. Known as the house that Ruth built, the original Yankee Stadium opened in 1923 and quickly became hallowed ground for baseball fans worldwide. Babe Ruth's towering home runs and larger-than-life persona gave the stadium its nickname, and it lived up to every bit of the legend. Located in the Bronx, Yankee Stadium wasn't just a sports venue. It was a cultural landmark where history was made. The stadium witnessed championship glory, unforgettable games, and moments that shaped not only baseball, but American culture. Its gargantuan bleachers and ivy-covered outfield walls became iconic backdrops for countless memories. Though the original stadium closed in 2008, replaced by a modern facility nearby, its legacy endures in the hearts of fans and the annals of sports history. It symbolized New York's larger-than-life attitude, where heroes are made and legends never die. And towering above the city streets is a building just as iconic, known for its quirky shape and groundbreaking architecture. The Flatiron Building, completed in 1902, was originally called the Fuller Building. The Flatiron Building is one of New York City's most recognizable landmarks, thanks to its distinctive triangular shape and dramatic presence at the intersection of Fifth Avenue and Broadway. Completed in 1902, it was originally known as the Fuller Building, named after the construction company that built it. Standing 22 stories tall, the Flatiron was one of the city's first skyscrapers, a bold experiment in steel-framed construction that shaped Manhattan's skyline. Its narrow wedge-like design was a response to the oddly shaped lot it occupied, making it both a practical and aesthetic marvel. The building quickly became a favorite subject for photographers and artists, symbolizing the city's innovative spirit. Today, the Flatiron remains a bustling office building and a beloved architectural icon, a testament to New York's ability to blend functionality with style and to turn even awkward spaces into masterpieces. And just a few blocks away lies a stretch of the city dedicated to culture, museums, and artistic exploration. A true museum mile. New York City has a museum mile along Fifth Avenue with several major museums. Stretching along Fifth Avenue between 82nd and 105th Streets, New York's Museum Mile is a cultural treasure trove that houses some of the world's most famous museums, all clustered in a few short city blocks. It's a testament to the city's deep commitment to arts, history, and education, and a magnet for both tourists and locals looking to get their fill of culture in one fell swoop. Within this stretch, you'll find institutions like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum, the Jewish Museum, and the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, among others. Each museum offers a different slice of human creativity and history, from ancient artifacts to contemporary masterpieces. The area is a testament to how New York manages to cram more beauty, knowledge, and inspiration into its tiny island than seems humanly possible. Walking down Museum Mile, it's easy to forget you're in one of the busiest cities in the world. Here, the pace slows and the focus shifts to discovery, reflection, and wonder. If you think New York is just hustle and noise, these museums quietly prove otherwise. But if museums can foster history, then sports can foster legends, and the story of baseball's professional beginnings starts here. The first professional baseball team, the New York Knickerbockers, was formed in New York City in 1845. Long before the Yankees and Mets ruled the boroughs, baseball's first professional team, the New York Knickerbockers, took the field in 1845, right here in the city. This was baseball's infancy, a time when rules were fluid, uniforms were simple, and the game was as much about socializing as it was about competition. The Knickerbockers formalized many of the rules that laid the groundwork for modern baseball. They played on the Elysian Fields in Hoboken, across the river from Manhattan, but their roots were firmly planted in New York's burgeoning sports culture. The team's formation marked the transition of baseball from a casual pastime to an organized sport, helping to ignite America's enduring love affair with the game. The Knickerbockers' legacy isn't just about baseball. It's about the city itself, a place where innovation, community, and passion converge, setting the stage for a century of athletic and cultural milestones. Speaking of aquatic milestones, New York is also home to America's oldest continually operating aquarium. The New York Aquarium, founded in 1896, is the oldest continually operating aquarium in the United States. Located on Coney Island, the New York Aquarium has been delighting visitors with marine wonders since 1896, making it the oldest continuously operating aquarium in the United States. It's a place where generations of New Yorkers and tourists alike have marveled at the mysteries of the underwater world without ever leaving the city. The aquarium has survived fires, hurricanes, and the ever-changing tides of public interest, constantly evolving to balance education, conservation, and entertainment. Its exhibits showcase everything from playful sea otters to massive sharks, reminding visitors that New York's biodiversity extends beyond skyscrapers and pigeons. More than just a tourist attraction, the aquarium plays a critical role in marine research and rehabilitation, reflecting the city's commitment to environmental stewardship amidst urban chaos. It's a unique blend of science, spectacle, and storytelling, perfectly emblematic of New York's eclectic spirit. And if you think the city's natural wonders are confined to water, think again. Because New Yorkers spend an average of 40 minutes a day doing something that's more exhausting than any aquarium visit, commuting. The average New Yorker spends 40 minutes a day commuting. 40 minutes. That's the average amount of time a New Yorker spends commuting each day. To anyone not from the city, it might sound reasonable, barely enough time to catch up on a podcast episode or finish a chapter of a book. But for New Yorkers, it's a sacred, oft-hated ritual packed with every possible frustration the urban commute can offer. Whether it's squeezing into a crowded subway car, navigating endless traffic jams, or waiting for a bus that never arrives on schedule, commuting in New York is a test of patience and stamina. This daily trek affects millions of lives, shaping routines, moods, and even social interactions. You learn to master the art of personal space invasion and tune out the 4 a.m. saxophone soloist. The commute isn't just about moving from point A to point B. It's a performance, a collective endurance challenge where strangers share the same claustrophobic bubble, united in a love-hate relationship with the city's relentless pace. And while New Yorkers wrestle with their daily grind, sports fans faced heartbreak and drama when the beloved Brooklyn Dodgers packed up and moved west. The Brooklyn Dodgers moved to Los Angeles in 1958. The Brooklyn Dodgers weren't just a baseball team. They were a symbol of pride, working-class grit, and community identity for Brooklynites. Founded in the late 19th century, the Dodgers built a passionate fan base, famously led by Jackie Robinson, who broke Major League Baseball's color barrier in 1947, forever changing the sport and American society. But in 1958, heartbreak struck when the Dodgers moved to Los Angeles, leaving behind a loyal fan base that felt abandoned and betrayed. The move marked the end of an era, and many Brooklynites still grieve the loss of their team to this day. The Dodgers' relocation also symbolized the growing influence of television, money, and westward expansion in sports. It changed New York's baseball landscape and left a void that would only be partially filled decades later with the Mets. As the city coped with losing a beloved team, it was also grappling with the massive complexity beneath its streets, its sewer system. The New York City sewer system is so vast that it has its own zip codes for some sections. When you think of New York's infrastructure, you probably picture skyscrapers, subways, and bridges, not the city's sewer system. But beneath the bustling streets lies a vast network of tunnels and pipes so extensive that parts of it have their own zip codes. This subterranean labyrinth manages billions of gallons of wastewater every day, ensuring that the city above remains livable. Built in phases over more than a century, the sewer system is a marvel of engineering, designed to handle the demands of millions of residents and constant development. It's a hidden city beneath the city, with maintenance crews working in cramped, dark conditions to keep everything flowing smoothly. The system's complexity and size reflect New York's growth and its unique challenges, balancing modernization with preserving the environment and public health. It's a reminder that the city's greatness isn't just on display above ground. It's also in the unseen systems that keep it running. And speaking of underground, New York was also home to the world's first underground railroad station, a true pioneer of subterranean travel. The world's first underground railroad station was built in New York City in 1868. Before the subway became the city's unofficial sauna and stress test, New York pioneered the idea of subterranean travel. In 1868, the city debuted the world's first underground railroad station, an engineering experiment that was half bold innovation, half, let's see what happens if we dig a big hole and shove a train through it. The Beach Pneumatic Transit System, as it was called, used air pressure to propel a single subway car through a narrow tunnel under Broadway. It wasn't exactly a runaway success, but it captured the imagination of the city and set the stage for what would eventually become the mighty New York subway system. The pneumatic subway was more sideshow curiosity than actual mass transit, featuring velvet seats, chandeliers, and curious Victorians who paid to ride the future for a few short blocks. Still, it was the spark that ignited a transportation revolution. Today, the remains of this pioneering tunnel are a footnote in New York's history. But the dream of an underground city never died. The world's first station laid the groundwork for the vast, relentless network New Yorkers know, love, and complain about every single day. And while the real subway system was still decades away, the city's pop culture footprint was already growing, sometimes thanks to a little TV trickery. The Friends apartment building is actually in Greenwich Village, but the show was filmed in Los Angeles. Pop quiz. Where do Monica, Rachel, Ross, and the rest of the Friends gang actually live? If you said Central Perk, congratulations, you've watched too much TV. In reality, The iconic exterior shots of their apartment were filmed at a real building on the corner of Bedford and Grove Streets in Greenwich Village. But here's the New York twist. The show itself was filmed on a soundstage in Los Angeles, thousands of miles from Manhattan. This classic bait-and-switch is peak television magic. Fans from around the world still flock to the Greenwich Village building to snap selfies and pretend they, too, can afford a giant rent-controlled apartment by working as a chef and a waitress. It's a pilgrimage to a place that's both absolutely New York and not New York at all, a perfect symbol of the city's blend of myth and reality. Of course, the real New York is far less tidy, but a lot more interesting. And if you want to see where the world's money actually changes hands, beyond sitcoms and skylines, look no further than Wall Street. The New York Stock Exchange is the world's largest stock exchange by market capitalization. Forget monopoly money and Hollywood glitz. If you want to see real fortunes rise and fall, the New York Stock Exchange, NYSE, is the epicenter. Located on Wall Street, the NYSE is the world's largest stock exchange by market capitalization, a fortress of marble, screens, and relentless energy where billions are made and lost in the blink of an eye. Since its humble beginnings under a buttonwood tree, the exchange has grown into a symbol of American capitalism. Every weekday morning, the opening bell signals another day of chaos as traders, brokers, and analysts jostle for position. The building itself is a landmark, and the trading floor is an orchestrated frenzy of hand signals, shouts, and digital wizardry. The NYSE isn't just a place for finance nerds. It's a stage for drama, triumph, panic, and the occasional celebratory confetti storm. It shapes global markets and influences everything from pensions to pizza prices. And when the trading day is done, New York turns its attention from finance to music. Because what's a city without a legendary jazz club where the nightlife never sleeps? The legendary jazz club Birdland was founded in New York City in 1949. If the stock exchange is New York's daytime symphony of chaos, Birdland is its nighttime jazz anthem. Opened in 1949 on West 52nd Street, Birdland became one of the most famous jazz clubs in the world. A smoky, electric haunt where music legends were born and late nights stretched into early mornings. Named after the great saxophonist Charlie Bird Parker, the club was ground zero for bebop and the revolution of modern jazz. Birdland's stage was a revolving door of genius. Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Thelonious Monk, John Coltrane, Miles Davis, and more. Here, the air was thick with both cigarette smoke and possibility. It was a space where improvisation ruled. The crowd was as savvy as the performers, and the energy was always on the edge of transcendence or disaster. Even after closing its original doors in 1965, Birdland's legacy never faded. The club eventually found a new home in Midtown, proof that New York never lets a good legend die. It just gives it a new address. And while jazz might seem timeless, the city itself is home to one house that's older than Broadway, Birdland, and most ideas about what a Manhattan mansion even is. The oldest house in Manhattan, the Morris Jumel Mansion, dates back to 1765. Tucked away in Washington Heights is a relic from a New York that few can imagine. The Morris Jumel Mansion, the oldest surviving house in Manhattan. Built in 1765, it's a rare survivor from a time when the city was more farmland than financial district. The mansion has played host to everyone from George Washington, who used it as his headquarters during the Revolutionary War, to Aaron Burr, yes, that Aaron Burr. Its walls are steeped in history, and some say haunted by the city's ghosts, an appropriate detail for a home that's witnessed everything from colonial intrigue to Gilded Age opulence and neighborhood transformation. Today it stands as a museum, open to the curious and the historically inclined, offering a rare glimpse into a New York of horse-drawn carriages, powdered wigs, and the slow churn of revolution. As the city evolved around it, skyscrapers replacing farms, subways replacing horses, the Morris Jumel Mansion has remained a stubborn survivor, quietly observing the never-ending parade of change. Speaking of apples and stubborn survivors, let's talk about a state that grows more apples than almost any other. New York, of course. New York State produces more apples than any other state except Washington. Move over. The Big Apple isn't just a clever nickname. It's a statistical near-truth. New York State is the nation's second-largest apple producer, beaten only by Washington State. This apple abundance stretches from the Hudson Valley orchards to upstate farms, feeding city markets and cider houses with varieties that sound more like indie rock bands than fruit. Empire, Cortland, McCown, and the perpetually hip Honeycrisp. Apples are woven into the DNA of the state. Each autumn, New Yorkers flock to pick your own orchards, returning with bags full of apples and Instagram photos to prove it. They end up as pie, cider, snacks, or simply tossed into the bottom of a tote bag to be forgotten until January. The apple isn't just fruit, it's a symbol. It's an edible badge of local pride and a nod to the state's deep agricultural roots, thriving just beyond the city's concrete grip. But while apples are a staple, the next New York icon floats like a futuristic mushroom garden on the Hudson River. The Little Island Park on the Hudson River is supported by 132 mushroom-shaped pilings. Leave it to New York to reinvent the concept of a park by literally floating it above the river. Little Island, which opened in 2021, is a whimsical green oasis perched atop 132 massive mushroom-shaped concrete pilings rising from the Hudson. Part urban playground, part sculptural marvel, it's a park that defies both gravity and the city's addiction to right angles. Little Island is a patchwork of rolling lawns, gardens, and curving walkways, all set against panoramic views of the Manhattan skyline and the ever-busy river below. The park was designed not only to be a peaceful escape, but also a performing arts hub, with an open-air amphitheater and a steady lineup of concerts, dance performances, and family events. The real genius is in the engineering. Those mushroom pilings create a surreal, dreamlike atmosphere, as if you're wandering through a modern fairy tale. It's another classic New York paradox: nature and infrastructure, whimsy and grit, all mashed together and elevated above the ordinary. And as far as elevated spectacles go, nothing quite matches the city's obsession with dropping a giant ball on New Year's Eve. The New York Times Square ball drop began in 1907. Before the confetti, the countdowns, and the slightly panicked live TV hosts, New York's iconic Times Square ball drop began as a simple publicity stunt in 1907. When fireworks were banned, the New York Times needed a new way to mark the arrival of the new year from their then headquarters in Times Square. The solution: a 700-pound iron and wood ball illuminated by 100 light bulbs, lowered slowly down a flagpole as thousands of freezing revelers cheered below. Since then, the tradition has grown into a global spectacle, beamed into living rooms and smartphones around the world. Today's ball is a high-tech marvel covered in thousands of Waterford crystal triangles, a dazzling symbol of hope, endings, and fresh beginnings, even if you're stuck in a crowd of strangers wearing cardboard hats and novelty glasses. The ball drop is more than just an excuse to freeze your toes off in Midtown. It's the world's most watched exercise in collective anticipation. And as soon as the glitter settles, New Yorkers get back to their regular routines, including a visit to the city's very first public zoo, where the animals have as much attitude as the locals. The first American public zoo, the Central Park Zoo, opened in 1864. Central Park is full of surprises, hidden gardens, mysterious statues, and, since 1864, America's very first public zoo. Long before animal rights were a topic, and well before zoos became sleek conservation centers, the Central Park Zoo began as an informal collection of animals, think swans, bears, and the odd bison, donated by wealthy New Yorkers and eccentric showmen. What started as a ragtag menagerie quickly became a city institution, charming generations of visitors, with everything from exotic birds to snow leopards. The zoo sits in the heart of Central Park, surrounded by the relentless pace of the city, providing an oasis of wildness in the middle of all that urban ambition. It's a place where school kids gawk, tourists snap photos, and locals rediscovered the thrill of seeing a red panda in the wild. Well, almost. Through its many transformations, the Central Park Zoo has reflected the city's changing attitudes toward wildlife, science, and spectacle. It's yet another piece of evidence that New York is always ready to reinvent even the simplest pleasures. And up next, we look at the kind of reinvention that only the city's billionaires can pull off. New York City is home to the most billionaires of any city in the world. If money talks, New York City practically screams. The city that never sleeps is also the city that never stops making or spending money, boasting more billionaires than any other metropolis on the planet. Wall Street tycoons, real estate moguls, tech innovators, fashion royalty, and heirs to fortunes mingle on its sidewalks, sometimes literally stepping over each other for a cab. These billionaires shape the skyline, fund the museums, and yes, buy up entire apartment buildings just to never actually live in them. They fill penthouses overlooking Central Park, own private islands off the coast, and can be spotted at exclusive galas that raise money for everything from endangered pigeons to avant-garde art installations. If you ever feel poor in New York, don't worry. You're just surrounded by a level of wealth that would make a sultan blush. Of course, the presence of all these billionaires has a ripple effect, driving up real estate prices and making affordable housing a mythological concept discussed only in fairy tales and city council meetings. But for those who crave green space, the city also hides natural riches, like the Staten Island Greenbelt, which offers a patch of wilderness that puts even Central Park to shame. The Staten Island Greenbelt is 3 times the size of Central Park. Think Central Park is the city's grandest green space? Think again. Staten Island's Greenbelt sprawls across nearly 3,000 acres, 3 times the size of its more famous Manhattan cousin. It's the city's best-kept secret, a patchwork of forests, wetlands, hiking trails, and wildlife that gives New Yorkers a rare taste of true nature without ever leaving city limits. The Greenbelt is an urban explorer's paradise. You can hike for hours, birdwatch, or just lose yourself among towering trees and quiet ponds. It's a favorite haunt of locals who want solitude and space, a rare commodity in a city built on density and hustle. From secret meadows to old quarries, it's a living reminder that even in New York, wilderness can persist. Despite its grandeur, the Greenbelt is still New York to its core, rugged, unpredictable, and full of surprises. It's where city kids go to discover tadpoles, and grown-ups rediscover the simple pleasure of walking without traffic. But if natural wonders leave you breathless, wait until you see what happens when an architectural legend leaves his mark on a museum's design. The Guggenheim Museum's unique design was created by Frank Lloyd Wright. The Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum isn't just another boxy institution crammed with art. It's a swirling sculptural marvel, the architectural equivalent of a bold jazz solo. Designed by the legendary Frank Lloyd Wright and opened in 1959, the Guggenheim is instantly recognizable for its spiral ramp that coils up like a nautilus shell, guiding visitors through modern masterpieces in one continuous flow. Wright's design was controversial, to say the least. Critics called it everything from a washing machine to an inverted oatmeal bowl. But over time, the building has become as iconic as the art it contains, a landmark that challenges and redefines what a museum can be. Walking its ramp, you're immersed in both art and architecture, each enhancing the other, blurring the lines between structure and exhibit. The Guggenheim stands as a symbol of New York's willingness to embrace the new and the bold, to value vision over convention. And just as the museum gave a new home to modern art, the next phrase on our list helped define New York's identity as a melting pot of cultures, dreams, and contradictions. The phrase melting pot to describe a diverse society was popularized in the early 20th century, often associated with New York City. If New York City had an official flavor, it would be everything at once. The phrase melting pot wasn't just coined to describe a city. It was practically invented for New York's sprawling, boiling cauldron of cultures, languages, cuisines, and ambitions. Though the term had been floating around for centuries, it was in the early 20th century, thanks to Israel Zangwill's play The Melting Pot, that it stuck firmly to New York. The city quickly became the shorthand for America's dream of inclusion and transformation, where people from every continent landed with hope, hustle, and often a suitcase full of confusion. Ellis Island processed millions, each adding their own spice to the communal stew. Italians with their pasta, Eastern Europeans with their borscht, West Africans with their jollof, and so on. The result is a city where you can eat 4 different continents for breakfast and still be hungry for lunch. But Melting Pot isn't all kumbaya and street food festivals. It's also a story of tension, reinvention, and the constant push-pull between old roots and new growth. It's messy, noisy, and, like most things in New York, utterly irresistible. And speaking of irresistible icons, the city's yellow taxis didn't always come in that cheerful, unmistakable hue. The iconic yellow taxis of NYC were originally red and green. The classic yellow cab is as much a part of New York's DNA as pizza grease and subway delays. But those iconic taxis weren't always yellow. Originally, the city's fleet was a festive jumble of red and green. That was until the early 20th century, when an entrepreneur with a keen sense of branding and visibility realized that yellow stood out in the city's visual cacophony. By the 1920s, yellow cabs became the standard, making it easier for passengers to spot them amid traffic chaos. What began as a marketing gimmick quickly became an urban symbol, immortalized in movies, pop art, and 1,000 broken dreams of hailing a cab in the rain. The color change was more than cosmetic. It was a piece of urban design that reshaped the city's image. The taxi became a symbol of mobility, anonymity, and the endlessly renewed hope that you might, just this once, get a polite driver and a functioning seatbelt. But if yellow taxis are New York's moving icons, the city's oldest public park is its green, beating heart. A patch of land that predates even the U.S. itself. The first public park in the United States, Bowling Green, was established in New York City in 1733. Nestled at the foot of Broadway in Lower Manhattan, Bowling Green is a rare oasis of calm in the city's relentless storm. Established in 1733, it's the oldest public park in the United States, long before anyone dreamed up Central Park, let alone national parks. It started as a bowling green for the city's British elite, which explains the name, and soon became a gathering spot for all manner of colonial shenanigans. Bowling Green has witnessed the birth of a nation, the toppling of King George's statue, whose head, legend has it, was paraded through the streets, and the unending parade of tourists on their way to gawk at the charging bull. Today, it's a leafy triangle where office workers lunch, street vendors hustle, and history quietly whispers beneath the shade. The park's age and location make it a symbol of continuity in a city obsessed with change. A little patch of green that has survived revolutions, skyscraper booms, and the rise of selfie sticks. And just beneath the surface, the city's history waits to be uncovered, sometimes literally, in the subway tunnels where museums find their homes. The New York Transit Museum is housed in a decommissioned subway station. If you think museums are all marble halls and velvet ropes, the New York Transit Museum is here to reroute your expectations. Nestled in a decommissioned 1936 subway station beneath downtown Brooklyn, this museum is a living, rumbling testament to the city's obsession with transit. Part nostalgia trip, part subterranean playground. Here, visitors step through heavy old turnstiles and descend into a world where vintage subway cars, antique buses, and mosaics chart the city's relentless march forward, and occasional breakdowns. The museum brings the gritty glamour of mass transit to life, inviting you to sit on century-old train seats, peer at faded advertisements, and realize that even in 1924, New Yorkers were already annoyed about delays. It's an immersive, oddly comforting experience. Kids press buttons, transit nerds geek out, and lifelong city dwellers reminisce about the days when subway tokens ruled and the fare was pocket change. The Transit Museum is more than a tribute to movement. It's a reminder that New York's identity is always on the move, sometimes stuck in traffic, but never at a full stop. If you think subways are wild, just wait until you hear about the heroes who wrangle the city's greatest daily battle, the trash. The New York City Sanitation Department is the largest sanitation department in the world. Forget superheroes. The real titans of New York are the city's sanitation workers, men and women who tackle the Sisyphean task of keeping 8 million people's mess under control. The New York City Department of Sanitation is the largest of its kind on Earth, employing thousands and collecting more than 12,000 tons of trash and recyclables every single day. The department's iconic white trucks are as much a fixture of the city as yellow cabs and street vendors, clanking down avenues at dawn, braving blizzards, strikes, and every variety of urban detritus. Their work is relentless. The battle against overflowing bins, rogue pizza boxes, and unidentifiable slime never ends. Sanitation workers are the unsung backbone of the city, ensuring that behind the glitz and glamour, life remains somewhat hygienic. When the department goes on strike, the city's true fragility is revealed in mountains of garbage, proving once and for all that New York runs not just on ambition, but on an endless supply of heavy-duty garbage bags. And if you think cleaning up the city is an impossible mission, you'll love the next impossible challenge New York tackled: Fashion Week, American style. The first American Fashion Week was held in New York City in 1943. Fashion Week today is a dazzling circus of runways, models, and paparazzi, but it all began in New York City during the darkest days of World War II. In 1943, with Paris, the epicenter of couture, under Nazi occupation, American designers seized their moment. New York's Press Week was born, not to celebrate excess, but to show that American style could stand on its own. Editors, buyers, and influencers, long before the age of Instagram, flocked to venues across Manhattan to witness the new season's collections. The event put New York on the fashion map, turning 7th Avenue into a catwalk and launching careers that would define the post-war world of style. What began as a wartime necessity became a global phenomenon. Today, Fashion Week is a twice-yearly riot of color, creativity, and attitude, drawing designers and celebrities from every corner of the earth. It's a fitting tribute to a city that thrives on reinvention, risk, and a stubborn belief that style is more than just fabric. It's identity stitched together at high speed. And when it comes to speed, the city's bridges leave Venice in the dust. New York City has more bridges than Venice, Italy. When most people think City of Bridges, their minds drift to Venice, with its romantic canals and ancient stone crossings. But New York, never content to be second in anything, boasts more bridges than Venice, over 2,000, spanning rivers, creeks, highways, and boroughs. Some are world-famous icons, like the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge. Others are so obscure even lifelong New Yorkers can't name them all without a map and a strong cup of coffee. These bridges are feats of engineering, monuments to the city's relentless need to connect, expand, and escape gridlock. They're lifelines for millions of commuters and the occasional lost tourist who accidentally ends up in the Bronx when they meant to get a bagel in Brooklyn. Suspension, draw, arch, and cable stayed, New York's bridges come in every variety, crisscrossing the skyline and undergirding daily life. Their construction reflects the city's signature blend of ambition and necessity. If you want romance, try the view from the Williamsburg Bridge at sunset. If you want raw functional power, check out the Triborough RFK Bridge as rush hour unfolds in all its honking, inching glory. Yet for all their concrete and steel, the city's bridges are also metaphors, linking not just boroughs, but cultures, histories, and generations. And if you think that's poetic, wait until you hear about the mysterious connection between pizza prices and subway fares. The famous pizza principle suggests that the price of a slice of pizza correlates with the price of a single subway ride in NYC. Forget the stock market. If you want to predict the real economic health of New York City, check the price of a plain slice and a subway swipe. Since the 1960s, the pizza principle has suggested an uncanny correlation. When the cost of a subway ride goes up, so does the price of a slice of pizza, and vice versa. Economists and journalists alike have marveled at this bizarre financial dance. Why does this happen? Is it a reflection of inflation? The cost of doing business in the city? A cosmic joke designed to torment broke New Yorkers? No one really knows, but the rule has held true for decades, turning into an inside joke among city dwellers and a handy measuring stick for outsiders. Next time you order a slice and wonder if you're being gouged, just check the MTA fare chart. If the numbers match, it's not a conspiracy. It's just New York's way of keeping things weirdly predictable in an unpredictable world. And speaking of keeping things under control, the next fact is all about New York's second-largest army, its legendary firefighters. The New York City Fire Department is the second-largest municipal fire department in the United States. The New York City Fire Department, FDNY, is more than just sirens, uniforms, and the occasional calendar pinup. It's the city's second-largest municipal fire department, only behind Los Angeles in sheer numbers, but unrivaled in legacy, tradition, and sheer cinematic drama. With over 11,000 firefighters, paramedics, and EMTs, the FDNY battles everything from raging high-rise blazes to kitchen grease fires and sixth-floor walk-ups. The department's roots go back to the 1700s, but its story is one of constant evolution. New technologies, new dangers, and a relentless commitment to keeping New Yorkers safe. The FDNY has weathered every disaster the city could throw at it. Fires, blackouts, hurricanes, and the unimaginable tragedy of 9/11s. Its members are revered as heroes, and its firehouses serve as neighborhood anchors, places where kids gawk at trucks and grown-ups find comfort in a community that never backs down from a challenge. But if you think their job is tough, try parking a decommissioned aircraft carrier on the west side and turning it into a museum. Welcome to the Intrepid. The Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum is housed on a former aircraft carrier. Leave it to New York to turn a massive piece of military hardware into a family-friendly attraction. The Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum sits on the mighty USS Intrepid, a real-deal aircraft carrier that saw action in World War II, the Cold War, and even NASA recovery missions. Now docked on the Hudson River, it's probably the only museum in town where you can touch a spy plane, tour a submarine, and stand beneath a retired space shuttle, all in one afternoon. Walking the decks of the Intrepid is like stepping into an action movie, except with more school field trips and fewer explosions. Fighter jets line the flight deck, each with its own tale of dogfights and diplomacy. Below deck, the ship's labyrinthine passageways echo with the ghosts of sailors past and the muffled footfalls of wide-eyed visitors. The museum is a tribute to American ingenuity and grit, with interactive exhibits that put you right in the cockpit or the crosshairs of history. It's also a lesson in creative repurposing. Why demolish a battleship when you can let millions climb aboard and imagine themselves as heroes? And if you thought New York only launched planes, wait until you learn it also helped launch the most famous independent film festival in America. The first American independent film festival, Sundance, was originally founded in New York City as the Utah U.S. Film Festival. Long before red carpets and snowy mountains, the Sundance Film Festival had its roots in New York. That's right. The original Utah U.S. Film Festival, the event that would eventually become Sundance, was first dreamed up and organized in New York City by a group of film buffs determined to champion independent filmmakers and give Hollywood a run for its money. While the festival famously migrated to Park City, Utah, and adopted Robert Redford's name, its DNA is undeniably New York. Scrappy, ambitious, and fiercely devoted to unearthing the next big thing in cinema. The city's influence lives on in Sundance's eclectic programming, boundary-pushing premieres, and outsider spirit. In true New York fashion, Sundance's beginnings were less about glitz and more about grit. The festival's early years were fueled by filmmakers crashing on friends' couches, passionate debates in smoke-filled rooms, and an undying belief that storytelling deserved a spotlight far away from Hollywood's shine. And speaking of New York's best-kept secrets, the next one is literally hidden in plain sight, on the rooftop of one of the city's great cathedrals. New York City has a secret garden on the roof of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. New York is a city of hidden gems, but few are as surprising or as literal as the secret garden perched atop the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. This sprawling Gothic cathedral in Morningside Heights is already jaw-dropping from street level, but climb a little higher and you'll discover a tranquil rooftop oasis complete with wildflowers, beehives, and sweeping city views. The garden is part spiritual retreat, part ecological experiment, a sanctuary above the chaos, tended by cathedral staff and a few lucky volunteers. Beehives supply honey, flowers attract butterflies, and for those who know how to get access, it's a spot to meditate, escape, or just brag on Instagram. It's a fitting metaphor for the city itself. Serenity hidden above the traffic, beauty blooming where you least expect it. And if you thought gardens on cathedrals were rare, try finding the first U.S. patent. Hint, that too has a New York story. The first American patent was issued to a New Yorker, Samuel Hopkins, in 1790 for a process of making potash. Innovation and paperwork, a match made in New York. The very first American patent was issued in 1790 to Samuel Hopkins, a New Yorker who devised a novel way to make potash, a vital ingredient for soap, fertilizer, and gunpowder. Signed by none other than George Washington, this humble document kicked off a national tradition of creativity protected by red tape. Hopkins's process wasn't flashy, but it was revolutionary, making a previously labor-intensive product much easier to manufacture. For New York, it was a sign of things to come, a city and state that would attract inventors, entrepreneurs, and dreamers by the boatload. The patent system itself was designed to encourage exactly this sort of innovation, rewarding ingenuity with exclusive rights and a little slice of immortality in the National Archives. Today, the spirit of that first patent lives on in New York's relentless pursuit of the new. From the skyscraper to the smartphone app, the city remains a breeding ground for breakthroughs, even if the paperwork is still an ordeal. And speaking of endurance, there's another New York tradition that pushes bodies and minds to their limit. One marathon to rule them all. The New York City Marathon route passes through all 5 boroughs. The New York City Marathon isn't just a race. It's a citywide 26.2-mile block party that manages to shut down traffic, inspire strangers, and humble even the most experienced runners. What sets it apart? The course snakes through all 5 boroughs, transforming the marathon into a guided tour of the city's heart, soul, and screaming lungs. Runners begin their journey on the Verrazano Narrows Bridge in Staten Island, then surge through Brooklyn's brownstones, Queens' melting pot neighborhoods, the wild cheers of the Bronx, and finally into Manhattan for a finish in Central Park. Each borough brings its own energy. DJs on sidewalks, fire hydrants spraying in the heat, children handing out orange slices, and block after block of encouragement, or sometimes bemused side-eye. For one day each year, New York's relentless pace pauses to celebrate endurance, diversity, and the strange joy of collective struggle. The city itself becomes the course, a living, cheering, occasionally heckling obstacle. And while not everyone crosses the finish line, everyone leaves with a story. But if you think running through 5 boroughs is tough, try being the first to have an appendix yanked out successfully, all while New York looks on in skeptical fascination. The first successful appendectomy in the United States was performed in New York City in 1887. Medical history is rarely glamorous, but New York always manages to add a little extra drama. In 1887, the city claimed another first when Dr. Abraham Groves performed the United States' very first successful appendectomy. Before this, appendicitis was basically a death sentence, a ticking time bomb no one wanted to touch. In a small, anxious operating room, Dr. Groves made the cut, removed the offending organ, and, crucially, the patient lived to tell the tale. It was a breakthrough moment, not just for the city's medical reputation, but for modern surgery itself. The successful appendectomy paved the way for safer, more sophisticated operations and made emergency surgery a thing that could end in something other than disaster. New York's hospitals quickly earned a reputation for pioneering medicine, attracting talent, money, and the occasional mad genius. The city would never stop innovating, especially when it came to matters of life and death. And for the next item, we return to the realm of rare treasures, a book that helped spark the Renaissance. And yes, New York owns a copy. The New York Public Library has an original copy of the Gutenberg Bible. Among its millions of volumes, the New York Public Library houses a treasure that changed the world, an original copy of the Gutenberg Bible. Printed in the 1450s by Johannes Gutenberg, this book wasn't just a literary breakthrough. It was the iPhone launch of the 15th century. The Gutenberg Bible represents the dawn of mass communication, the moment when books left the hands of scribes and landed in the laps of the people. Owning such a relic cements New York's status as a global cultural capital. The library's copy sits proudly in a climate-controlled glass case at the main branch, guarded like a crown jewel by patience and fortitude, the famous stone lions out front. Tourists and scholars alike make pilgrimages to stare at its delicate pages and impossibly perfect type, wondering how a book can survive for centuries while most subway schedules disintegrate in a week. It's more than a rare collectible. It's a tangible reminder that progress often starts with the written word. In a city obsessed with the next big thing, the Gutenberg Bible is a love letter to old-school innovation, proof that sometimes the oldest treasures have the most enduring stories. And speaking of stories that span continents, New York also played a role in launching humanity across the Atlantic. The Spirit of St. Louis, Charles Lindbergh's plane, was assembled in San Diego but departed from Roosevelt Field in Long Island, New York, for its historic transatlantic flight. The story of Charles Lindbergh's legendary solo flight across the Atlantic begins, rather unromantically, on a patch of Long Island dirt, Roosevelt Field. While his plane, the Spirit of St. Louis, was assembled in San Diego, it was from New York that Lindbergh took off on May 20th, 1927, heading for Paris and immortality. At the time, Roosevelt Field was one of the busiest airports in the world, hosting daredevil aviators and would-be record breakers. But Lindbergh's flight was different, a gamble that captivated the globe. With nothing but sandwiches, coffee, and blind optimism, he launched himself into the sky, chasing a $25,000 prize and a place in history. The city buzzed with excitement as Lindbergh vanished over the Atlantic, and his safe arrival in Paris turned him into an instant celebrity. New York's role in his epic journey is a testament to the city's status as a launching pad for dreams, risks, and the occasional spectacular act of lunacy. From the sky, New York looks impossibly dense, and that's no accident. The city's population density is legendary, for better or worse. New York City's population density is among the highest in the United States. Crammed onto a narrow strip of land surrounded by rivers and ambition, New York City's population density is nothing short of legendary. Manhattan alone boasts more than 70,000 people per square mile, making elbow room a theoretical concept and personal space a luxury reserved for billionaires, hermits, and certain Central Park squirrels. This density creates the city's unique energy, a constant swirling mix of languages, cultures, and ambitions, all rubbing shoulders and occasionally yelling at each other in subway cars, elevators, and deli lines. Living here means embracing the art of coexistence, improvising privacy, and learning to sleep through sirens, street music, and 3 a.m. garbage collection. But the upside is monumental. Endless opportunity, diversity, and a creative spark that comes from having so many ideas bumping into each other every single day. Of course, it also means that finding an affordable apartment is the real New York marathon. And for the next fact, let's talk about science, Nobel Prizes, and the blurry boundaries between New York and its neighbors. Because, as usual, New York always manages to steal some of the spotlight. The first American to win a Nobel Prize in physics, Albert A. Michelson, did important early work at Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, NJ, just across from NYC, and was part of New York's scientific community. New York claims a lot of firsts, and when it comes to Nobel Prizes, it doesn't let geography get in the way of a good story. Albert A. Michelson, the first American to win the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1907, did much of his groundbreaking early work at Stevens Institute of Technology, just across the Hudson River from Manhattan and Hoboken, New Jersey. But like most great minds in the region, Michelson was drawn into the city's magnetic field, collaborating with New York's scientific elite and regularly haunting its universities, laboratories, and lecture halls. Michelson's experiments with the speed of light weren't just scientific milestones. They were the beginnings of a citywide obsession with innovation and discovery. New York became a crossroads for thinkers, inventors, and dreamers, all testing the boundaries of what was possible. The city's universities and museums are still home to Nobel laureates, and its laboratories remain crucibles for scientific breakthroughs. If you can elbow your way past the grant writers and skeptical peer reviewers. So while the Nobel plaque hangs across the river, the city's fingerprints are all over the story. And as you ride the subway through tunnels of innovation, you might just catch a glimpse of another icon, one that ticks in the center of Grand Central, adorned with gems and a million whispered rendezvous. The iconic Grand Central Terminal clock has real opals in its face. If you're meeting someone under the clock in New York, chances are you mean the four-faced masterpiece at Grand Central Terminal. Suspended above the information booth, this iconic clock has silently kept New Yorkers on schedule, or at least made them feel guilty about running late, since 1913. But this is no ordinary timepiece. Each of its faces is crafted from opal, real opal, which, depending on your source, makes it worth somewhere between a few million and please don't touch on the city's unwritten price list. The clock has been a rendezvous point for generations, bearing silent witness to tearful farewells, clandestine affairs, hopeful first dates, and the daily stampede of commuters. Oh, it's more than just a landmark. It's a living piece of New York mythology, proof that even in a city obsessed with speed, there's always time for a dramatic entrance. If you ever lose track of time in the city, just look for the opal glow. Unless, of course, you're lost in the labyrinthine grid that starts just a few blocks uptown. New York City's grid system north of 14th Street was laid out in 1811. Before GPS, before Google Maps, before every phone came with a blue navigation dot, New York imposed order on chaos with its legendary grid system. In 1811, city planners unveiled the Commissioner's Plan, a north-south, east-west layout that stretched from 14th Street all the way to 155th, slicing Manhattan into neat rectangles that defied the island's natural curves, old Dutch streets, and even common sense. The grid was radical. Boring to some, brilliant to others. But it reshaped Manhattan, turning the city into a rational, walkable, and, let's be honest, marketable metropolis. The grid made real estate easier to buy, sell, and subdivide. It simplified the city for newcomers, even if it meant erasing old hills, ponds, and neighborhoods with a ruler's unyielding edge. Today, the grid is both a blessing and a punchline. If you're lost, just keep walking. Eventually, you'll hit a numbered street. It's the city's greatest act of organization, a visual metaphor for New York's desire to impose order and predictability, right up until the next act of glorious chaos. And if you think city planning is a circus, wait until you hear who perfected the modern version, right here in New York. The first American circus was founded in Philadelphia in 1793 by John Bill Ricketts, but the modern circus as we know it was shaped and popularized by figures like P.T. Barnum in New York City. Sure, the first American circus officially took its bow in Philadelphia, but leave it to New York to grab the spotlight and reinvent the spectacle. Enter P.T. Barnum, the legendary showman who turned the traveling circus from a dusty sideshow into a roaring, riotous, citywide event. Barnum's flair for the dramatic and the bizarre found its perfect home in the city's teeming streets and endless appetite for entertainment. New York was the laboratory for Barnum's greatest hits. Human oddities, daring acrobats, massive parades, and marketing campaigns that made even the most skeptical New Yorker shell out for a ticket. His American Museum in Lower Manhattan was part freak show, part natural history museum, and part masterclass in hype. It wasn't just a circus, it was a full-tilt, immersive world, as likely to horrify as to amaze. In the end, it was New York's restless crowds and ceaseless buzz that helped shape the modern circus, a blend of chaos, artistry, and entrepreneurship. It's a fitting final fact. The city that never sleeps will always find a way to turn the ordinary into the spectacular, the mundane into the mythic, and the impossible into the unforgettable.